For 15 years, I have studied global conflict, military operations, and the hidden tectonic shifts of international geopolitics. I have analyzed every multi-theater engagement strategy since I entered this field, watching how modern superpowers mask major kinetic operations behind a veil of diplomatic theater while moving massive naval configurations into position. Most people think the recent explosions across the Persian Gulf are just minor border skirmishes or a temporary breakdown of a fragile truce. The reality is far more terrifying, indicating an absolute collapse of regional deterrence and the launch of an unprecedented, systematic campaign. On May 7, 2026, the United States military launched an unthinkable wave of retaliatory airstrikes, hammering over 40 critical Iranian military facilities across southern Iran, Bandar Abbas, Qeshm Island, and western Tehran. This devastating barrage came directly after Iranian forces targeted 3 American warships transiting the volatile Strait of Hormuz. The consequences of this dramatic escalation will alter global trade maps and energy security for the next decade. What was decided in those chaotic hours will reshape the international financial system, accelerate a domestic debt crisis, and force a direct economic showdown between the world's primary superpower and its rising Eastern challengers. Tonight, I want to walk you through 3 questions the mainstream coverage refuses to answer honestly. First, how did these strikes systematically erase Iran's missile network? Second, what secret economic deals were struck at the Trump-Xi summit? Third, how will this conflict crush your savings? Subscribe now and stay with me because the answers will challenge everything you think you know. Stay with me. How did these strikes systematically erase Iran's missile network? Here is what actually happened. On May 7, 2026, the Persian Gulf became a shooting gallery when Iranian anti-ship cruise missiles, low-flying suicide drones, and fast-attack swarm boats targeted 3 American guided missile destroyers, the USS Truxtun, the USS Rafael Peralta, and the USS Mason. These vessels were actively executing Operation Project Freedom, a massive deployment designed to safeguard over 23,000 international civilians stranded by the ongoing naval blockade. I want to be direct about this. The American response was not a standard limited warning shot. It was a highly orchestrated, devastating offensive that completely dismantled the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' Southern Command architecture. The mechanism of this strike relies on an advanced multi-domain electronic warfare suppressive grid. Before a single kinetic bomb fell, American EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft completely blinded the coastal radar networks across southern Iran. This digital scalpel sliced directly through the enemy's integrated air defense nervous system, rendering their advanced tracking arrays useless. Immediately following this electronic blackout, low observable stealth assets launched precision-guided munitions, turning more than 40 hardened military installations into roaring infernos within minutes. The primary geographic focus of this devastating barrage targeted the strategic naval installations at Bandar Abbas and the subterranean missile storage facilities dug deep into Qeshm Island. Simultaneously, massive secondary explosions illuminated the coastal areas near Bandar Kamir and Sirik, completely obliterating mobile anti-ship missile launchers before they could reload. In western Tehran, deep underground command bunkers were struck with heavy bunker buster munitions, completely disrupting communications between central leadership and frontline naval units. This operation effectively vaporized the defensive shield Iran had spent over a decade building. From a professional standpoint, this level of synchronization indicates months of rigorous planning, demonstrating that the Pentagon was merely waiting for a clear justification to pull the trigger. According to official assessments, this tight naval blockade has already cost the Iranian regime over $4.8 billion in lost oil revenues since it was implemented on April 13th, completely strangling their ability to fund proxy networks across the Middle East. The sheer speed of the devastation left regional adversaries stunned, as entire radar sectors simply disappeared from the map like dust blown away by a desert storm. But that is not the most consequential dimension. What matters far more is what comes next. What secret economic deals were struck at the Trump-Xi summit? And here is where the analysis gets uncomfortable. Just days after those devastating explosions rocked the Persian Gulf, President Donald Trump landed in China for a high-stakes bilateral summit with paramount leader Xi Jinping from May 13th to May 15th, 2026. While the mainstream media focused entirely on the empty political theater in Tiananmen Square, the real game was played out behind closed doors within the Great Hall of the People. The pieces are shifting significantly, and the strategic logic driving these two superpowers points directly to a grand macroeconomic bargain. Most analysts are missing this crucial insight. The United States did not launch those massive military strikes on Iran despite the China summit. They launched them because of it, using raw military power as a brutal negotiating lever to force Beijing's hand on global economic terms. I have seen this pattern before in the historical dynamics of empire decline. When a dominant superpower faces a severe domestic debt crisis and skyrocketing interest payments, it must project overwhelming military dominance to maintain the credibility of its financial system. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was quietly working in the background during these meetings, attempting to establish an unprecedented Board of Trade and Board of Investment. The strategic imperative for Washington is simple: force China to commit to massive purchases of American oil, soybeans, and Boeing aircraft to artificially support the American economy, while simultaneously threatening further punitive tariffs if Beijing continues to throw a financial lifeline to Tehran. China currently buys approximately 90% of Iran's crude oil exports and acts as the primary supplier of critical electronic dual-use components to the IRGC. In this escalation scenario branch, if Beijing decides to ignore Washington's warnings and continues to fund the Iranian regime, the Pentagon is fully prepared to expand its naval blockade into an absolute maritime interdiction zone, directly seizing commercial vessels across the Indian Ocean. This would inevitably pull Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation deeper into the conflict, as Moscow seeks to exploit the chaos by opening a secondary strategic front in Eastern Europe to completely break NATO's cohesion. I have argued for years that global conflicts are never isolated events. They are deeply interconnected battles for monetary dominance. Right beneath this, something more dangerous is taking shape within the global bond market, and this is where it stops being abstract and starts being about your money and your future specifically. Let me tell you what this means for you specifically. The geopolitical explosion in the Middle East and the escalating debt crisis in Washington are about to hit your household finances like a freight train. Let me give you a specific data point regarding the immediate mechanism of energy pricing. With the Strait of Hormuz effectively locked down under a strict U.S. naval blockade, global energy markets are experiencing a severe supply shock. This will inevitably drive domestic gas prices up toward $5.50 per gallon, representing a staggering 35% increase in nationwide fuel costs within the next few weeks. This spike isn't just about what you pay at the pump. It directly increases the transportation costs for every single consumer good entering the country. Consequently, your weekly food costs are projected to climb significantly because the agricultural supply chain link is tied directly to diesel fuel and synthetic fertilizer prices, both of which are skyrocketing due to global shortages. Furthermore, your retirement savings and 401k portfolios are facing severe purchasing power erosion. As the Federal Reserve is forced to monetize the massive federal debt to fund ongoing military operations like Operation Project Freedom, inflation will surge past 6%. This high inflation environment means the central bank cannot lower interest rates, cementing your 30-year fixed mortgage rates above 7.5% for the foreseeable future, completely crushing the American housing market. On a macroeconomic scale, the job market is already experiencing severe disruptions, particularly within manufacturing and logistics sectors, as international supply chain bottlenecks force corporate layoffs. Looking at the global fallout, the energy crisis will hurt European allies the most, as countries like Germany and Italy are stripped of alternative energy options, forcing them into severe industrial stagnation. Meanwhile, the China-Russia axis stands to reap massive strategic benefits. Beijing is using this exact moment of American overextension to lock in heavily discounted alternative energy routes through Central Asia, insulated from Western naval power. A critical supply chain stat reveals that over 20% of the world's daily petroleum liquid consumption passes through the exact choke point where American warships are currently engaged. But this is where it turns truly serious, because the financial system cannot tolerate this level of geopolitical volatility without something major breaking behind the scenes. So here is where this goes, and I am going to be direct. Over the next 30 to 60 days, we are going to witness a critical inflection point that will define the remainder of 2026. The current unstable truce cannot hold, and the global arena is splitting into two distinct paths. The first path is one of rapid escalation. If the Iranian regime ignores Donald Trump's warnings and utilizes its remaining ballistic missile stockpiles to target regional energy hubs in Saudi Arabia, the conflict will explode into a full-scale multinational war, forcing a direct military intervention by Israel and potentially dragging Chinese naval assets into the Persian Gulf to protect their oil transit lines. The second path is a highly conditional diplomatic resolution, where Beijing uses its immense financial leverage over Tehran to force a permanent capitulation, effectively trading Iran's geopolitical ambitions in exchange for major American trade concessions regarding semiconductor access and Taiwanese sovereignty. From a professional standpoint, based on every historical pattern of empire transitions I have analyzed, the probability of a peaceful resolution is exceptionally low. Washington's massive debt burden means the United States must secure a decisive geopolitical victory quickly before domestic economic instability undermines its military capability. And here is the part nobody is saying out loud. We are running out of time to safeguard our personal capital against this unfolding transition of global power. The global order is being rewritten in real time, and the economic structures we took for granted for decades are actively dissolving. As these over 40 destroyed bases in Iran show, the era of gray zone conflict is over, and the age of raw superpower kinetic confrontation has officially begun. My question for you tonight is this: as the U.S. national debt climbs and the threat of an expansive global war draws closer to our shores, what specific steps are you taking right now to protect your family's financial future? The empires of the past always collapsed under the dual weight of printing money and fighting endless foreign wars. And history never repeats itself, but it frequently rhymes. I'm Marcus Reid. I'll see you next time.